honestly don't have much of an intro for this video. All I can honestly say is, I really miss Chester Bennington. I do. I miss him a lot. That's all I could really say in this intro. Let's just get on to the video. Welcome back to 10 Years Later, the video series where I talk about albums from the 2010s that were either impactful to me, impactful to music in general, very popular, or just worth revisiting 10 years later, be it for good or bad reasons. And this was one I was very much looking forward to going back to. As you can tell by the title, the album that we'll be talking about today is the 2010 Linkin Park album, 1,000 Suns. Linkin Park, we know them by now. One of the most popular rock bands of the 2000s. Their first two records, Hybrid Theory and Meteora, remain very loved and very popular to this day. Even though I wasn't a super fan when I was younger, I grew up listening to a lot of Linkin Park music. I remember when my dad got his first iPod and I would listen to a hell of a lot of their songs. Tracks like Breaking the Habit, Easier to Run, Numb, and In the End were in very heavy rotation for me. At one point a few years ago, I even did a drum cover of Breaking the Habit on this channel as a tribute to Chester Bennington after his unfortunate suicide. I previously unlisted the video as I did with my other drum covers, but if you guys want to go check it out and tell me how much it sucks, the link to it will be in the description. However, a few years prior to this album, Linkin Park released Minutes to Midnight, which was a massive change from their nu metal sound to more of an alternative rock sound that, despite being a huge commercial success, led to many accusing them of selling out. And with this record, the group changed their sound once again to something that resembled more of an electronic rock sound with a thematic focus on nuclear war, and that again led to very polarizing reactions from fans. Personally, I didn't have as much familiarity with this album as I did with their earlier projects, but having grown up with them, I was just excited to go back and re-experience the group's music. The album is 15 tracks and 47 minutes, which isn't bad in terms of length. Surprisingly, it's their longest album though, and I was definitely hoping this record would be worth revisiting. And despite some flaws, I can say that it was. When this album is going right, it's going very right. Even though most of the album is indeed a sonic switch up from the group's past work and isn't quite as heavy as those first few albums, it still sounds pretty good. Burning in the Skies is a bit smoother than some of the group's previous material, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that Mike Shinoda and Chester Bennington do a great job on the vocals here. The song does have a few solid sonic twists, mostly with some lighter pianos, before coming through with these slick guitars midway through in a way that I think is weaved together pretty nicely. And even though many say that Linkin Park lost their hard sound after the first two albums, I think that When They Come For Me is a particularly hard song with a banging reverb heavy beat and a performance led by Mike's rapping where he answers back to many of the people that were angry at their change of sound and encourages them to catch up with the group. It's a pretty strong track and I love the overall confident tone of it too. And Waiting for the End was a pleasant surprise as well. It's a track that excellently blends poppy sounds with rock, bits of hip hop, and what even sounds like a bit of a reggae-esque performance from Mike. He sounds great here. The sonic elements connect far more harmoniously than you might think given all of the genres that I mentioned, and Chester absolutely kills it on this one. He sounds great and gives a very stunning performance that I'd probably consider some of the best vocal work that I've heard from him. Also, when I hear a song like Blackout, I have to wonder if people really said that the group stopped going as hard. The beat itself here is twisty, much like many of the best songs here, but what sells it for me is Chester's very aggressive screamed vocals on the song. They're very impressive from a technical standpoint, of course, but it's also pretty stunning how well they fit with the vibe of the track. Mike also comes in late in the song and provides a more lightly sung bridge and outro, and thankfully, with how layered and ever-changing the instrumental is, these vocals fit well and round out the song very nicely. I also love the slick, super catchy guitar riffs on Wretches and Kings, which has a few elements that remind me of the group's older tracks, but with a little bit more of an electronic influence. I love Mike's flows throughout the song, and Chester's chorus has excellent energy as he delivers these yells that mix nicely with the song's harder vibe. I will also say that Iridescent, which shows up a bit late in the album's runtime, is the one track I've been very familiar with even before listening to the full album. I spent a lot of time listening to this song for several years, and it's still a track I very much enjoy. It's a very emotional song with one of the most compelling standout choruses that I've heard from Linkin Park, which is no easy task, and it has some very powerful trade-off vocal performances from Mike and Chester. This was also one of the many Linkin Park songs that for me took on a bit of a new meaning after Chester's passing, and it's still an easy favorite of mine not only from this album but from the group's entire discography. The Catalyst was also a big single from this album that I didn't realize I had heard in the past, but it definitely still bangs. I love how the song builds up with more slick guitars and a banging drum beat, and I think Mike and Chester once again do a great job passing off the vocals on here. The vocal melodies themselves, which have this somewhat offbeat, off-kilter feel to them, are some of the catchiest and most memorable melodies on the album, making it a track I very much enjoyed. One criticism I've heard about this album is the copious amount of short tracks, and while I do see their purpose in how they weave the sonic elements and changes the album together and make them feel necessary, I do agree that they're a bit much. I totally understand the perspective that these short tracks are like auditory breathers from the record as it jumps from one sonic style to another, and I can see why some people say that the album wouldn't feel the same without them, but having 6 short tracks on the album can be overkill. Hell, 3 of the first 4 tracks on here are extremely short, and 2 of them are under a minute long, even if they create decent transitions in sound. Come on, you couldn't just take these short tracks and attach them to the beginning or end of another song? Like the opening track, The Requiem, sounds good with some ethereal instrumentals and rather haunting vocals, but it's then followed by The Radiance, which does a good job of helping play into the album's concept of nuclear warfare, but at 58 seconds, I can't believe they didn't just attach this to the tail end of The Requiem. And given that Empty Spaces is only 18 seconds and has almost no instrumentation whatsoever, I'm kind of floored this was its own song. Jornada Del Muerto is also just over a minute and a half, and again, even if it sounds awesome, I would not have been opposed to them just slapping this onto the ending of Robot Boy. In fact, I would have been cool with that, as given that I wasn't crazy about Robot Boy, and we'll get into that in a minute, it would have given the song a nice switch up to finish with. Wisdom, Justice, and Love clocks in just over a minute and a half as well, and while it still suffers from the short song syndrome, it's probably one of the better of the short tracks, as the song has a powerful, impassioned speech by Martin Luther King Jr., and some of the effects placed on it make it sound pretty haunting. Even as the album draws near a close though, the track Fallout sits just under a minute and a half. This cut is essentially a more robotic ambient reprise of Burning in the Skies, and again it sounds decent, but it just feels like there could have been more. And as a whole, that's how I feel about most of these short tracks. A number of them could have been slapped onto other songs, but also a few could have been ripe for expansion too. Also, I will say that there is one full-length song in here that I'm not crazy about, and as I mentioned a little bit earlier, it is Robot Boy. The track feels like a total 180 after When They Come For Me, which kind of shoots that argument about the sonic transitions in the foot given the jarring shift between these two songs. And honestly, the track is a bit of a pace breaker for me. It's got a few decent twists to it, and it does have a few solid anthemic themes to it, but these somewhat robotic harmonies on the song don't grab me, and it feels like the track just kind of drones on and becomes a bit repetitive too quickly. Still though, pretty much all the other full-length tracks on here are very compelling, and the album also hits a huge high for me in the closing track, The Messenger, which is an acoustic cut solely featuring Chester, where he sings about love and positivity and what kind of feels like a glimmer of hope after the last 14 tracks focused on the negativity of the world and the nuclear war. Chester's vocals are powerful and almost broken, and I feel like it's another one of those Linkin Park songs that hits even harder in the context of Chester Bennington's passing. Chester battled a lot of demons, but through it all, he did what he could to keep a positive attitude and to spread that encouragement and positivity to others. And it's a song that really hurts when you realize that Chester worked so hard with this song and so many others to provide hope and possibly save the lives of other people, even if the one life he couldn't save was his own. As much as his words helped heal the wounds of others, myself included, it hurts that his words couldn't heal his own wounds. This is the kind of song that will stab you in the heart when you hear it, and it's hard to listen to it and not get a bit choked up. Just his passion on the song and the love that went into this performance is heart-wrenching, and it's a track that showcases just how insanely good Chester was at just capturing raw emotion in his vocal performances. It's a beautiful finisher to the album, and it's easily one of my favorite Linkin Park songs. Overall, I very much enjoyed my time with this album. I do think it is a flawed project, and I guess in some way I can see why fans might not dig it as much as the group's other albums. That said though, I do think much of this record feels faithful to Linkin Park's older discography, and the changes in sound do feel pretty natural here. The electronic style mostly works to the group's benefit. Some of the concepts and themes running around here, such as warfare, are crafted pretty well, even if it feels like not every song centers around them, and the vocal performances throughout this record are consistently excellent. I know I've given a lot of praise to Chester's performances, and he does do an amazing job with this thing, but also give it up for Mike Shinoda on this album, because his rapping is as solid as ever, but this album relies more on his own vocals and his singing, and he proves to have the chops and versatility to carry a song vocally. I also think naturally that his chemistry with Chester throughout this record was palpable, and it felt like they brought out the best in each other all throughout the album. Again, my only big flaw that I think holds the record back is these short tracks. Again, I see how they work and function with the album, but pretty much all of them could have either been tacked onto another song or expanded upon at least a little bit. If this album was just the 9 full-length songs, it would absolutely earn my highest possible score and recommendation recommendation. Yes, even with Robot Boy on it. But unfortunately, the interludes are big pace breakers and take the album down a few notches for me. Even so, this album is a great listen, and if you were one of the many people that didn't enjoy it back in the day, I do highly recommend giving it another chance. And if you didn't listen to it before, go ahead and do that now. This definitely feels like an album that's gotten better with age. Back in 2010, I probably would have liked this thing a lot. As I said, I grew up on Linkin Park, so I wouldn't have been surprised if my 12-year-old self decided to bump this album every day. And listening to it now, I do still very much enjoy it, even if, like I said, a few of the shorter tracks could have been either combined or expanded upon. If I had to rate the album, it would definitely earn a good on my scale. It came very close to getting an excellent, and surely would have if not for those interludes. But nevertheless, this was a great album that I must say I think got received a bit harshly and unfairly when it first came out. I definitely recommend you listen to it if you haven't already, and if you have, I recommend giving it a new examination. But that's just my opinion on this album. What did you guys think about it? Did you listen to it back when it first came out? Do you still listen to it now? Which side of the polarizing feedback were you on then, and which side of it are you on now? Whatever your thoughts are, just leave them down in the comments. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe, thank you. If not, it's no big deal. I totally understand. In terms of what's next, my next 10 years later video is the Scripps Science and Faith. As soon as I turn this video off, I'm just gonna film that, and it will be released hopefully shortly after this goes up, so stay tuned for that. But until next time, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.